What's the craziest thing your boss asked you to do? Used to deliver pizza for Domino's on an e-bike. The e-bikes we used had a bunch of wiring underneath the saddles. One day, the wiring caught on fire while I was delivering an order, so the fire started burning underneath my ass. Also, obviously, the batteries stopped working, so it became very tough to ride the e-bike. Asked the shift manager of that evening if I could get another e-bike to use for the rest of the evening. He told me, as long as you're not on fire yourself, you're using this e-bike. Quit my job shortly after that. Story 2. Ex-boss. He asked me throw kittens over an embankment. I was driving the front end loader over to a pile of bark chips that we had covered up for quite some time. I pulled back the plastic cover and see a fuzzy gray pile. It turned out to be a fresh litter of kittens. Eyes haven't even opened. I phoned it in to my boss, and he said that there was no time to help them and to just toss them over the embankment because we had customers waiting. I scoffed, hung up the phone, and immediately called my girlfriend to come pick up the little floofs to take them to the local shelter. He's an ex-boss for a reason. Honestly, I was not surprised that he asked me to do that. The dude was a complete ducking. He's confided so much nasty crap to me that I could write a book. Story 3. Worked in food and beverage. At a hotel, I had lots. We were told to continue using expired milk products. We didn't do it. The chef, who had a massive ego, even for a chef, convinced the hotel to let him put on these super pretentious 20-person private dinners at $85 per ticket. Each time they would sell less than half of the tickets. So we were asked to buy the remaining tickets ourselves and give them to family members. Also, they could pretend the chef's latest vanity project was a success. I was once asked to cut my vacation short because my boss realized none of my coworkers had any clue how to do my work while I was gone. I was on the other side of the world at the time. Once, while I was on disability due to an injury, my boss angrily called me demanding I explain why I had missed a mandatory staff meeting. I could keep going for hours. Hospitality really is a crap industry to work in. Story 4. A long time ago, I worked at a grocery store. They decided to no longer get the cleaners that came in with special gear to clean out the compactor, presumably to make extra money. The compactor began to stink to high heaven. I'm talking rotten meat, produce, etc. So they asked me to climb inside and clean it. I laughed at them and said no. I told all my coworkers to say no. One did not listen and went in and cleaned it. He had to go home because he stunk so bad and reeked for days afterwards. There is a reason a specialist comes in to clean it, wears a hazmat suit, and has the machine disconnected with another person standing there, making sure no one turns it on. Story 5. I started working at a homeless shelter the week after the pandemic was announced. It was pure chaos from the moment I walked in. I received no training whatsoever and somehow ended up training new people by my second day with what I had picked up on from my first day. Anyway, my second week, the shelter was closing down and trying to move everyone into an empty hotel in a different city since a shelter is a horrible place to be in a pandemic. Somehow, by the sheer forces of chaos, I ended up in charge of moving 20 people by public transportation across the city to get on the buses leaving the city. As an example of how totally whack it was, one of the other people they had decided would help with this was actually someone staying at the shelter who somebody just assumed was a staff. They called a list of names, couldn't find everyone, so called some other names, and then left me to it without even passing on the list. Add to this that everyone thought they were leaving later that week, so nobody was prepared to leave. People had stuff they still needed to put in storage, people they had to find/say goodbye to. Keep in mind, we're traveling to another city. Appointments and things they were supposed to go to. They're told we're leaving right now, and they can only take whatever they can carry, and told to meet out front on the sidewalk where they're mixing with all the other homeless folks outside and everyone else doing business, etc. out there. I have no idea who is supposed to be coming with me, and most of them don't know what's going on either. We get them across the street to separate them from all the other people, so we know who's who, which is an endeavor on itself, because we've got 20 folks mostly quite old and using walkers and stuff, many with schizophrenia and other issues leaving them confused and hard to wrangle, all carrying all of their possessions in their arms like refugees, which they essentially are at this point. Everyone is just milling about in chaos, and finally I snap into camp counselor mode and put everyone into 4 groups with different group leads who they are supposed to stick with at all costs, and then hike everyone a few blocks to the city bus where we have to take 2 separate buses due to social distancing, and somehow everyone eventually made it. I can't say for sure if it was my boss who asked me to do that, because at that point, I don't think anyone had told me who my boss was, but that was probably the craziest thing I was ever asked to do at work. Story 6. Would we like to go on call for free if the one person scheduled for the Saturday shift needs help or calls in sick? A weekend away for a team building exercise, paid for by ourselves, including travel, accommodation, food and expenses, in our own time. No thank you. Story 7. My old shop owner used to have us techs pour coolant down the toilet instead of disposing of it properly. After enough of us raised a fuss, he started dumping it in the street himself. Story 8. Run a nursing home laundry room with no experience and no training. I didn't even know how the machines worked. Industrial laundry machines are not like your home washing machine. The extent of my training was having an underqualified supervisor telling me, "You'll figure it out." Story 9. I was called to cover for a temp who quit on the spot off hours. I responded that I already was 2 whiskeys in and didn't want to get into my car to drive to the site. He responded that since I was coherent enough to have a conversation with him, I was okay to make the 30-minute drive to the office. I told him I wasn't about to risk a DUI for him and hung up. Story 10. Worked at a crafty college town pizza place that paid me $5 plus tips under the table. It would get insanely busy on days when there were football games and boss required all hands on deck. 12-plus hour days were not uncommon when there was a game. I got to the store at 10 a.m., 2 hours before opening, and worked until 3 a.m. the following day. By the time 2 a.m. rolls around and the crowds finally die down and we start closing shop and cleaning up, my boss pulls back the entire front counter, which was on wheels, to reveal dozens of little roaches scattering everywhere. He gave me a broom and told me to clean up the roaches. I waited for him to go out back to smoke his cigarette. I took everything from the tip jar and left. Never went back. Story 11. I used to work at Taco Bell, and on the receipt, there was a little online survey at the bottom. My manager told me to go through the trashes to find receipts that people had thrown out so that we could fill them out ourselves so our store would get a better rating. I was a stupid 17-year-old, so of course I did it. We used to give ourselves perfect reviews all the time, actually. Story 12. Worked for a thrift store. They wanted to go cheap and collect donations from around state, specifically the reservation. Instead of seeking out-of-state donations like they used to, we got such horrible quality product from donation. Nightmares. Blood-stained pants, BO shirts that you can feel, stuff you wouldn't even give homeless people. People literally donated their trash or pets. Yeah, they didn't survive. We were literally out of product for the whole week, and my boss was pissed that I wasn't producing the quota that the company figured for our store. I asked him, "How can I get your numbers when I'm literally sorting trash?" He got in my face. I was a 22F and alternative metalhead style, and said, "Don't forget who you're talking to." He saw I wanted to throw hands and backed off after he realized I wasn't cowering. That week, I was working from 4 a.m. to 8 p.m., trying to not get in trouble, even though I got written up for every little thing that I could get written up for. Getting called into the office was never about a raise or a promotion. In that GM's previous position, he was a manager at Home Depot. He ended up having an affair with a coworker on the clock and bragged about it. He got fired for it, thus getting to my work and talking crap about his ex-wife being fat and his new GF being hot AF. He was very narcissistic. He honestly was not even good looking by any means. Same with the previous GM of that company that got fired for a love triangle of coworkers that every one of them were married but jealous of each other, especially when it came to one of them actually sleeping with the GM. Oof. After I raged, quit quite literally, and he wanted me to come back because I worked there for 8 years and knew all the departments. Duck Tony. He's a piece of crap, and I hope he gets all sorts of cheated over. Story 13. My first real job out of college was one I lucked into. I ended up working for a local business in a role kind of sort of related to my degree, but my responsibilities were light, and I was honestly probably paid more than I was worth. Essentially, I was a glorified office seat guy, but in a specific professional field. Sort of an office troubleshooter, crossed with an intern. Anyway, my boss, who is honestly a really nice guy, ended up tasking me with running some cables from our office to his house across an empty lot he owned, in between the two. And he wanted them laid in a trench in some kind of waterproof conduit, and I had no help. So basically, he wanted me to plan it out, search out and price the materials, submit that to him to actually purchase all of it, potentially arrange equipment rentals, go out and dig a trench and run cables through a pipe, figure out how to run the cables and pipe through one or both buildings' walls, etc. Basically way above and beyond anything I was doing there day to day, and both barely and only technically related to my job, since one of them would have been an Ethernet connection. After apprehensively talking it over with him for a few days, he started to realize how big the project would be and decided to go in a different direction, much to my hidden relief. Story 14. Boss asked me for proof of broken leg when I hit it on the way to work and missed my shift. Other boss had me doing work in multiple departments and accounts with no training, besides what I taught myself from internal SOAPs, emails, etc. It was common practice for me to do 8 and 9 hours of pure overtime 3 to 4 times a week for months with no breaks, BC. It was so busy and I was doing so much. Not directly related to my job. Left my apartment building for the bus to work, slipped and fell on the ice and hit my tibia and fibula. I had to go in for surgery to have rods and plates put in. When I told my boss I couldn't come to work because I broke my leg, she asked me to send receipts, as in send proof. So I sent her a picture of my leg in a cast in the hospital bed. Most recent job, I worked for a healthcare logistics company as a customer service rep, but I did a bunch. My primary role was working with clients, pharmaceutical companies, and in many cases, their customers as well. I was working basically full work hours worth of overtime, at least 3 times a week for months, not taking lunches, doing data maintenance, and training new employees by myself. My bosses then have the audacity to tell me they need me to take on 2 more accounts on top of the 7 I was doing. When I told them I don't have time to train, they told me to just read the emails and teach myself while still doing all of the above. The insane thing is, that is how they expect everyone to learn. No training period, no help, teach yourself and hope it all works out. By the time I left, I was doing my work and learning how to do other people's work because nobody could be bothered and I was just expected to pick up the slack. Story 15. I'm a graphic designer and my new boss at the time asked me what I thought would be cool to design. I said that beverage packaging had my interest and that I would like to design something like a whiskey brand or something similar. He then tasked me with creating a whole entire whiskey brand all by myself. So, finding whiskey in Scotland, founding the whole brand and creating the brand strategy, coming up with a campaign that would make it successful, finding places to sell it, etc. And of course the design. Now I'm skilled at what I do, but creating a whiskey brand from scratch is not something you can do all by yourself, on top of your other work. I told him that finding a whiskey distillery that sells white label that you can brand as your own is quite difficult. And distilleries don't just sell you one casket. It's hugely complicated with contracts about how much you will buy and a lot of other business stuff I know nothing about. He then told me to go to Scotland by myself and visit all the distilleries and meet up with the owners. How am I going to get appointments? I told him these places are all over the country and a lot are in the Highlands. I don't drive, no license, and it's not like you can take a bus there. He then told me I should hitchhike. As a woman traveling alone, that's about the easiest way to get yourself hurt. He kept piling things on, and because I was new to the company, I had a hard time saying, "Bro, WTF, this plan is nuts. I just wanted to design a cool label." I ended up getting swamped in other work, so I had an excuse not to do all that crap. But he loved reminding me of how that project failed. The project he created and pushed on me, which was totally impossible to begin with, and that was never even started. Story 16. At the beginning of COVID, most of our pregnant patients were staying at home and not coming to the hospital for minor things such as mild ABD pain, UTI, STD checks, etc., as they had before, because they were scared to come to a hospital. Our census obviously dropped. To try to get the census back up, our managers told us that if a patient called asking whether they should come to the hospital or not, we were supposed to just tell them to come no matter what their complaint was, even if it was something that they absolutely did not need to come in for. I refused to do this, so I'd just transfer any calls to my charge nurse and let them deal with it. Let's bring an already immunocompromised pregnant patient to the hospital in the very beginning of an unpredictable pandemic for something they don't really need to come in for. Sure, SMH. Story 17. I work for a small dealership and have been working there for the last 3 years after I came back from my deployment. I got hired as a sales guy and kind of just worked my way into doing financing. Mind you, I'm still getting paid as a sales guy and no commission. My current salary is $24K a year, but I'm working 60+ hours a week. Recently, since October, he's been working at another dealership, so that kind of left as the one running the entire store. But I endure it and keep pushing and selling and doing the financing. But the other week, he and his family took a week-long vacation, which is fine, I don't care, even though I haven't had a vacation since 2020. His son also works for him as a car buyer for both stores, and he pays his son more than me. But anytime I bring up a pay raise, he complains about his bills. Now, in the US, the average pay range for a finance guy is about 55 to 60K a year. But anytime I have a problem that's above me, I send it to him or let him know about it. But lately, he's been getting really snarky in his comments when I miss a minor detail or something doesn't get done the way he wants it. He's always asking me to come in during my free time, or I end up having to come in during my one day off, which could be just the 1 in 2 weeks. I would love another job in finance, but I don't have a 4Y or a degree in finance, even though I could run circles around all the kids coming out of school. What should I do? Story 18. I was approximately 5 months pregnant when my CEO decided we were moving offices to a location she knew we had voted against as a lot of us couldn't get there. I was originally going to take maternity leave once baby was born, but she personally insisted I stay behind to hoover and clean our 3-story office before handing it over to the letting agents while very pregnant. Once the office was cleaned, my colleague and I transferred all remaining items to the new office. Nothing major. We get there and I'm told we need to carry and unpack boxes full of documents. I insist I can't because I shouldn't be lifting anything over a certain weight. CEO insists I have to do my bit or I will lose my job. End up with a hernia caused by this, document and make a complaint. I attend a meeting to express my complaint with said colleague for support, only to find afterwards that the CEO has threatened anyone who supports me with getting fired prior to the meeting she should not be a part of. I felt I had no option to quit, but I really wish I had taken it further. I just wasn't in the right frame of mind at the time. I should add this. EO was known by staff to badmouth her donors and staff behind their backs, all documented. She also employed her adult children and friends who did 1% of the work we did for multiple times our meager salary. I should have complained to the board of trustees who had already paid off the best manager we had ever had due to similar toxicity. But hindsight is a wonderful thing when you're pregnant and stressed to the hilt. Story 19. I worked for an examination board a while ago. During an A-level results day, I noticed a fault in which a grade for one particular exam was not being calculated properly. I was just admin and customer services, so there is no way that I should have been the first person to notice. The crazy thing that I was asked to do was shut up about it and not tell anyone. There had already been some bad press about the company, so I think they were hoping to fix the issue before anyone noticed and reported it to the press. In my job after that, I was asked to travel to Ukraine in the middle of the pandemic, as I was the only person who could legally cross the border. There were already reports that cases were surging and that the borders would likely be closed. My manager's solution to this was me simply just staying in Ukraine until the borders reopened. I ended up spending 2 days in Kyiv. Story 20. Worked at a convenience store, and my boss actually asked me if he could borrow $1,000 to pay for part of the beer delivery because they wouldn't have enough. Quit not long after that. Story 21, I have 3 of them. 1, my first job, I worked at the 12th day in the row and had 3 sweet days of sleeping ahead of me. My boss came and said I'd have to come in all 3. I said that I'd have to work 20 days in a row. If that's true, he said. IDK immediately sat down and wrote my resignation. I work in logistics at a very specific airport and everyone is looking for office workers there. So the next day I had a new job. Don't do this. If. 2, I was okay. Vacation in another country. No one has my actual phone number, and my work phone was obviously off. They searched me on FB and Insta and asked me to work the next day. I just sent a picture back of the beach. Boss said, I'll pay your ticket back. I said no and blocked him. 3, still same job as 2. Had a work accident and was brought to the hospital. Got 8 stitches on my right. Dominant arm obviously could work for 2 weeks. Came back to work. Boss demanded to see the stitches. I said no. He tried to rip of the huge ass Band-Aid. I reported him to HR. Story 22. I have several I can share. For around 15 years, I worked in the marketing field as a contractor, mainly as a marketing manager. 1. As marketing manager for a major liquor brand. I picked up my boss from the airport to go on a ride along to promotion events at accounts. On the way to the first event, he demanded I find him Coke, not the kind you drink, or he stated he would fire me. 2. As regional marketing manager for car dealerships. I was instructed by the owners to falsify permits of sales representatives. They were hiring felons, and felons can't get licensed to sell cars. 3. As marketing manager for a caffeinated beverage, the owner harassed me at a team dinner after a trade show. He told everyone he picked me out himself and I'm his beautiful girl. I excused myself and went back to my hotel room. He showed up at my room later that night, pounding on my door, telling me to let him in. I called my family crying, and they could hear him while on the phone. I didn't say anything to him nor answer the door. He eventually left. The next day, I flew home. A few days after that, I had a visit from one of the managers and was let go from the job, saying that things were not working out. I finally stopped taking on marketing contracts because of the amount of illegal things I was asked to do or saw, as well as how many times I was harassed. Story 23. I worked for a family-owned trucking company in their shop that maintained their fleet of tractors and trailers. I was no mechanic, so really I just swung a sledgehammer, changing truck tires, and made parts runs for the actual mechanics. One day, a trailer came in that was involved in a crash. The boss pulled the trailer into the woods on the property and opened up the doors. The trailer had been hauling 50-gallon drums of the concentrate used to make wine coolers. Over a dozen of them had busted open. There was 4 inches of thick, slippery, sugary sludge that was about the consistency of frozen orange juice. Concentrate, for those of you old enough to remember that. It was 95 degrees that day, and the boss dug a hole with a backhoe, then had me and another guy shovel this sludge out of the back of the trailer and into the hole. It was miserable, hot, sticky work, and we all ended up slipping and falling into the syrup at least once. The boss would make us stop every time he thought he heard a helicopter. In retrospect, he was overly paranoid. I doubt anyone was snooping on us, but he was worried someone would see him illegally dumping this sludge, even though it was on his own property. At the end of the job, he bought us lunch and sent us home early, but that was by far the craziest thing a boss has ever asked me to do. I suppose I'm party to some sort of EPA crime for that one. Story 24. My boss at a grocery/retail store told me to pour 4 big jugs of this industrial glass cleaner down the sink drain in one of 2 public washrooms. They've been in the back so many years, one chewed through the plastic and melted all the paint off the shelf. Honestly, don't know how I didn't damage my vision with the chemicals in the air. Long story short, I ended up with a few chemical burns on my arms and hands with not as little as an apology. Also, a schizophrenic chick almost got me in the guts with a screwdriver over a bottle of Head & Shoulders. Story 25. I had a boss that whenever we weren't busy at night, which wasn't very often, but still, or if it was raining, he just said we will be closing and that I should come in tomorrow X amount of hours earlier, X being the hours we closed earlier than we should have. As if it's my fault for bad weather or low foot traffic, and as if it's my responsibility to cover those hours. In the beginning, when I first started, I'm ashamed to admit that I did it a couple of times. But after that, I always answered that I had other responsibilities and couldn't. I should mention I was a full-time employee that worked split hours 6 times a week, 10 and again, 2300. Story 26. I'm a landscaper/arborist. Got hired as a foreman to do installs. First day in the job, my new boss hands me an electric chainsaw, like you would buy to cut a few small branches in your backyard. Tells me to go cut down a tree at a person's house and rip out the rest of the plants there to get ready to install. It's just a small tree, he said. This thing was 2 stories tall and leaning towards the house. I have no rope, no climbing gear, and it's just me. I showed up, laughed hysterically for a good 5 minutes, and then called to confirm this is what he wanted me to do. He said yes. I proceeded to laugh on the phone with him. He showed up huffing and puffing. I told him he can do it. He grabs the chainsaw, walks into the backyard, walks back out to me, says, rip everything else out, and leaves. He called in a tree company to take it down. That's when I realized the guy hardly ever went to the jobs he had planned, and it was all downhill from there, sending me in blind to places constantly. I moved to a new company as soon as I found one. Gotta love impossible tasks without the proper equipment. Did the same thing to me with a patio. Had to call and explain unless he's building a water slide, I can't match the house up to the height of an above-ground pool with a difference of 11 inches over a 12-foot run. Story 27. Asking me to stay late. Doesn't sound so bad, but this guy would sit in the office all damn day playing games on his phone and watching videos. When it would get busy, he would come out for 10 or 15 minutes for vanity purposes to show he was just like us. You weren't like us, Steve. You did duck all day and then asked us to sacrifice our lives for your crafty fast food place. He paid me $8,030 an hour in an area that had a median rent cost of almost $900 a month. The only reason I took the job was because I was in a rough spot and they were the first one to get back to me. But I would have shoveled crap for $8 hour. Duck you, Steve. I still can't believe you busted my balls for needing to go to the ER for crippling chest pain. I hope you're still working for that crafty company. Story 28. Worked in a restaurant kitchen back in the day. It was a small family-owned place, so about 5 of us in the kitchen total. It was a busy Friday night and the employee bathroom sewage system backed up and started coming out of the drains in the kitchen. My boss asked us to continue working while moving around in crafty water. It was just high enough to seep into your shoes. We had to build a barricade of towels so that it wouldn't leak out to the front of the house. One of the line cooks couldn't stop throwing up, so she clocked out and left. I was disgusted and my whole outfit was pretty much ruined, and knowing my boss, he would have had us all stay super late to deep clean the kitchen. I basically told him this was unsanitary and wrong on so many levels, and I clocked out and left. Threw away my shoes and pants in the dumpster, laid down trash bags in my car so I could drive home. I rinsed off with the hose outdoors before I felt comfortable enough to go inside and take a long, hot shower. Surprisingly, I continued to work there for another couple of months. The job worked perfectly with my school schedule. That place is now closed, but the smell and feeling of crap water in my shoes and socks will haunt me forever. Story 29. Started working in a charity warehouse. Second day on the job, mostly just moving donations in, out of the place as and when needed. And I'm left to watch the place on my own, since the guy who ran the place had to pop to the shops down the road to get something, and the others had yet to show up. So here I am, 17 years old, in charge of a warehouse full of crap. Washing machines, cookers, fridges, cabinets, bed frames, carpets, toys, tables, you name it, we sold it. But not a single thing had a price tag on it. So this couple comes in looking for a cooker and a washing machine. Now, I can direct these people to said appliances. I can read off the stickers on them to ensure that they've been pat tested on site and are safe to sell. I cannot tell you for the life of me how much they should be sold for. Because again, it's a charity place. We work off of donations and all this crap is secondhand. So I had to stand there and talk to this couple, showing them around for the next 10 minutes while I waited for the boss to get back and help the two out. Certainly the most stressful day on the job, but damn was it some valuable experience. Thank God I've always been good at bullcrafting my way out of awkward situations. Story 30. Babysitter here. The parents requested me to do so much. These are all different parents. Don't let the kids outside. I asked why, and they said that the neighbor, a middle-aged man, was a predator. Not sure how true that is. If the kids refuse to eat and make what they ask, if they don't eat, call us. They left money in case they wanted takeout. Don't let the kids eat any sugar. I asked if they're diabetic or something. I was told no, and that they didn't want the kids getting fat, sugar, high, hyper. Make sure the kids study the children's Bible before bed. They were very religious. I met that request and read it to them until they fell asleep. Don't feed the 5-month-old mashed potatoes. I was so confused. They said that the last person they had did that, and they had to take 5-month-old to the hospital. Don't let 4-month-old eat avocado. Last babysitter did that, and 4-month-old got sick. Don't go in our closet. Don't let the kids in our room. Their bedroom door was unlocked. I thought it was weird because I usually go in the bathroom, living room, and kitchen. Last babysitter did that and broke their expensive things. Didn't even offer to pay to repair them. I was offered to babysit because father worked overnight and mother was passed out drunk. I didn't babysit. Story 31. To go to India to enable a bunch of offshore contractors to do the job me and my team were doing because we need to scale. Or in other words, they could get 3 Indians for the price of one of us and wanted to reduce our team size. So you'd better believe I went to India and taught them all the wrong stuff and missed out important details. Story 32. My boss asked me to take his daughter to prom. I was a junior and she was a sophomore who desperately wanted the high school clout of going to prom before she was allowed to. You had to be a junior or senior to be admitted unless you were a +1. I wasn't planning to go, so I had no date anyway. I agreed and he covered my tux and a limo. His daughter was pretty. I only knew her in passing at the time as we were in band, but played different instruments. We went out to dinner beforehand, and I showed her a great time. Then the limo took us home. The next day I was at work, and my boss's wife came by and told me this girl had a huge crush on me and that I made her year. I took her out on a few more dates, and we're still friends to this day. I was a real craphead in my youth, but that's one of the times where I wasn't, and I still think back on it fondly. Story 33. I used to work at this super Christian craft and hobby store as the assistant manager. Close to the holiday season, one of our staff members had been out a couple of days and in the hospital. We roll around to Saturday and my boss, GM, called in around 10 a.m. for info about the day and to ask if said person was coming in. I said I hadn't heard from them yet. Well, GM starts going off and ranting about the person and tells me that if they try to call off again to make them come in, GM also said they would fire them if they called in again. Also told me I'd be in trouble if I couldn't force them in. This manager was basically the devil incarnate and put me in this horrible, awkward situation. The individual did call in and literally could not work since we're still in the hospital. GM also made me verify this. The way the GM said it was so wrong and had all the makings for a lawsuit. I think the GM knew it because they never followed through on the threats. But yeah, that was one out of thousands of stories I have. Very Christian, right? Story 34. After a break-in where the robber broke not only the glass door partly, but also entirely broke the ceiling-to-floor window next to the door and expected me to stay from 11:30 p.m., which I already worked a 9-hour shift earlier, and had to come back at 11:30 p.m. to talk to the cops about the break-in because her car wouldn't start, all the way to 6:30 a.m. when I needed to open the store and then work my scheduled 8-hour shift too. I was exhausted and didn't leave until probably 2:30 a.m. and went to sleep at about 3:10 a.m., and then still came back at 6:30 a.m. to open. Me leaving without securing the store almost got me in bad trouble too because the cops called the head of security for the company because they knew each other and they were like, "What is the assistant manager doing leaving the store?" They didn't ask me when I was leaving though. Weird, but they didn't. And then the head of security contacted my DM and then the DM contacted my manager and I was the assistant. This was the first time I'd ever dealt with a break-in. It was terrible, and my boss was even worse. Story 35. When I was 18, I was a program associate for a small nonprofit organization that helped troubled kids in poor areas of the city. One time, my boss left his credit card in a copier machine at a FedEx store and told me to drive 30 minutes downtown to retrieve it from the machine. Then another time, he had a board meeting with the city council members to request for more funding for the program, and he forgot his binder and laptop at home. He called me while I was at home to bring my binder and my laptop that contained the PowerPoint file, and he needed me to be there ASAP. He told me to drive as fast as I could. I said fastest I can drive is 45 mph. He told me to go 80 mph, and he'll pay for my ticket if I were to be pulled over. I was 18 and dumb, so I drove 80 mph to get there just in time for his presentation. He got the funding. About half a year later, the program was dissolved. I was let go, and he basically pocketed all the money and disappeared. I never heard from him again. Story 36. 2 stories. 1. Worked as an IT consultant, and I worked a ton and was bringing in a lot of dollar. Was doing consulting work for 2 very large auto manufacturers in Michigan, and I went on a 3-day vacation to Washington, D.C. to visit the area and attend a concert. Customer needed help, and boss told me he's dealing with it and may need to cut my vacation short and fly me back. I would have quit in a heartbeat, as I know I would have had another offer in minutes, as, at the time, I was world-renowned in my technology area that was in very high demand, too. This was at the beginning of my career. Started working at a startup of 5 people. Boss kept spending money on stupid stuff like a BMW M3 to keep up an image. Meanwhile, him and his family lived in a dump, and he started not being able to afford my paycheck and asked if I could just buy stuff and put it on his card. I wasn't having that, and he let me go. Story 37. At my first job, a man walked out the front doors with an armload of coats, stuffed them in his car, which he parked in a handicap spot, and started driving off. I walked outside to get his license plate number and wrote it down on a random paper. I went upstairs to inform my managers that there was a shoplifter, but I got his plate number, but I got in a bit of trouble for going outside. I understand that part, don't want to risk getting hurt chasing after a shoplifter. Then, my other manager told me to straight up ignore it. Ignore the plate number in my hand. I was so mad that I put in my 2 weeks that Monday. The following Saturday, that manager called me up to write a statement for the police about the shoplifter when I didn't have the number anymore. Complete crap. Story 38. Hired a new manager. Made much less than I. Being as I was there 4 years. Had me get up on my 1 day off and chase the GPS tracker in a company truck because he moved all the trucks to a lot and then it got broken into and they stole the truck. After 5 hours of chasing, he said, "We can't find it. It isn't the truck. Go home." He quit after number 1. He couldn't find the truck, and number 2. I asked him why I hadn't gotten paid, and when he asked how much I was missing, and when I told him $1,200, he then snapped, saying how I made double his pay, and he deserves so much more, and this, that, and the other. Bro, you literally just lost a $45,000 truck. How do you deserve more? The company ended up going bankrupt as another manager got ducked up on pills and lost 40-plus rigs in 1 day for us. This was an oil field job. They also stole $8,000 from me and stranded me in Texas for a couple weeks. Story 39. When I was working at McDonald's a couple of years ago, I remember that one customer who dropped his wallet in the toilet when pulling his pants up. He came to the front to ask somebody to help get it. Of course, my boss sent me. The toilet was full because he was done. And when I asked my boss for gloves or whatever to put on my hands, she got mad and told me to just duck and get it. I argued that I wouldn't do it without gloves, and she ended up accepting. So yeah, I took a wallet and a toilet full of crap with only blue latex gloves and ended up getting my boss mad at me. This was like my second job ever, so I felt bad for arguing with my boss, but realized later that I shouldn't feel bad about it. I quit like 3 weeks later because my boss was still mad at me for this, and I got tired. I still did almost 2 years there, and they would always make us do ridiculous stuff. Story 40. I work on a 24/7 open call center, which sells tickets for ferries. I was in the night shift, which is 0 to 08 on Korean. There was huge caller amount, and my supervisor asked me, "Can I work another 8 hours without timeout?" Karen let me sleep. Story 41. I worked at Shoney's, buffet-style restaurant in the southeast states. Had someone put a bunch of brown paper towels in the toilet and then crap on them. Needless to say, the toilet got clogged. My manager, Tom, duck you, Tom, suggested that I go fix that. I was a dishwasher and part-time cook. I asked him how exactly I should attack this problem. He said I had to go get a rubber glove from the back and pick it up, it being the massive log on top of the brown paper towels. May politely told Tom to duck right off. I was getting minimum wage at the time, $4.25 done. Long story short, Tom pulled the turd out of the toilet with his rubber glove on. I was blacklisted from ever working at another Shoney's or Captain D's ever again, due to throwing a guy through the pie rack in the lobby. Wasn't meant to be. Pie rack guy wasn't the crap bandit either. Story 42. I, female, worked in a uniformed law enforcement profession. My boss, who was an abusive, misogynistic, called me into his office one day. He made some work-related small talk involving some tasks he needed me to look into. As we were wrapping up, he picks up one of his uniform shirts and says, "My wife is out of the country on vacation, so can you sew a button on my uniform shirt for me?" I stared at him, shocked he would even ask such a thing, even though he would pull other crap just to exert his power, and said I absolutely would not do it, but I would happily make a call to the quartermaster to bring him up a new shirt. He got all weird when he saw I was going to call him on his bullcrap, and he couldn't get me out of his office quickly enough. And I wasn't some junior officer either, I was an immediate subordinate, manager. I was livid, and to this day will never forget it, or forgive him. Story 43. Worked at Disney World at Space Mountain for 4 months on an internship. Long story short, one day we found a lot of human crap in the waiting line. After we made the appropriate calls to have it cleaned up, the supervisor that was there told me not to stop the line and keep the ride running. After the supervisor left, I immediately called the front of the line, and told them to stop letting people in. Same supervisor also told me I should have kept the ride running one day after I hit the e-stop in the unload area because I heard what only could be described as a tank of CO2 breaking open anytime I sent a cart through. Story 44. Used to work nights when I was 17-ish. We're closing one night about 12:30 a.m., and the manager asks me if I'm going to city name. I tell him no, that's in the complete opposite direction of my house, but if he needs a ride, I'll help him. He says, well, I'm not the one that needs a ride, it's those two people. And he points to a homeless couple that basically lived in the store during the day. Now, I have nothing against the homeless. I've been there myself a couple times, but it was the middle of the night. These people were complete strangers who would violently fight in the parking lot, and one was obviously addicted to some hard crap. I was 17, 5'5", and about 95 pieces at the time, and would have to drive them through the wood to the next town over. I asked if he was ducking insane and told him to do it. Suddenly, he's making up excuses about why he can't. Story 45. I am a female that works in the project management side of construction. When I first got out of school and landed my first gig, it was with a very large general contractor. The owner of the multi-million-dollar project was a creepy dude who apparently had a thing for me. My boss picked up on this very quickly and soon demanded that I take all the meetings with the owner because I could get him to sign expensive change orders and other documents that he would either refuse or drag his feet on. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but now I realize it was so wrong. They used to send me out to schmooze him as well, in a group setting, box tickets to whatever sports games were on, expensive dinners, etc. I should have known better because entry level never get those perks. They were totally using me to their advantage for this dirty, creepy, perverted owner. Story 46. I was a media designer. He sent me a picture of the front of a product packaging he wanted edited. Then he comes over to my desk and conversation goes as follows. Boss, this is a good photo. I just need you to turn it. Me, what? Silence for a moment. Me, do you want it like 45 degrees or upside down? Boss, oh, no, that'd be silly. I want you to turn the box in the photo. I want to show the backside with the ingredient list, etc. Ice cold silence. I just look at him blank and wait for him to realize because I really just didn't know what to say. Took him about 2 minutes before he goes, oh gosh, sorry, you can't. I know, how should you? Like the pixels. I'll have them take a backside photo, and then he left in shame. We all have our bad days, even after 30 years in the industry. Story 47. Ex-bosses wanted me to be cross-trained to run an engraving machine. I told them I wasn't interested, but they forced me to sit through one training session, and shortly after I ended up working remote for a full year and not touching the machine or software during that time. The person normally running the engraver quit at some point and trained their own replacement, who wasn't me. The replacement quit and also trained their own replacement. Rather than have the other replacement run it for a specific job, they called me into the office to run it for a specific order. I didn't remember how to run it or its software. No YouTube tutorials existed for it, and the replacement's replacement had to show me how to do it. I almost broke the machine irreparably twice due to not having any clue what the hell I was doing. One of several reasons I was glad to leave that job. Story 48. One day my former boss was working from home, and she sent me an email with a zoomed-in screenshot from a random page on our website with some outdated information she wanted fixed. Fine. I asked her for the link to the page this was on. She replied saying that it was our website. Yes, that's the website. What page? She started getting short with me, saying she wasn't near a computer. The screenshot was clearly taken on her phone, so she can very easily tell me what page this error is on. But she ordered me to just look through 20 plus pages of website to find this one error that my previous comb-through hadn't found. She was quite fond of refusing to give me large parts of information that I needed to complete my job. And when I asked for more info, she would come and insult my intelligence. Thank God I got out of that job. Story 49. There was a stone band that had a hole in the top of it. It was attached to the 9th story. The roof level was at 9.5 stories. The roof perimeter was wrapped in metal spikes to keep pigeons from roosting. He wanted me to go to the roof, climb down onto decorative stone that was hollow and patch this hole. I ended up doing the work without being on the ledge. Luckily, the hole was big enough I could pour wet patch material into it from the roof, tamped it down with a long piece of rebar, and finished it with a stiff trowel on the end of a roller pole. Taped a 4-border brush to a roller pole, and gave it brush marks and was out of there in 3 yards. Stole the rubber doormat on the roof to lay over pigeon guards. I was home early and boss made out like a bandit, I'm sure. Story 50, not me, but a guy who I used to work with in one of his previous jobs. He worked as security in a large stadium. Anyways, during a game, a dog ran onto the pitch. Security got a hold of him and handed him the dog. He brought the dog to his boss or whatever and said, "What do I do? Maybe see if its owner is around?" The boss said without looking at him and like an evil villain apparently hid it. My guy hesitated but was assured, If he didn't terminate the problem, he'd be out of a job. At the time, unemployment was at a record high, and there was massive economic and social problems. So my guy hit it. That's hard to write, even though I've known that 25 years at least. Story 51. I worked in recruitment for a specific department. We got a new VP who is really big on DEI, so my director asked me to pull ethnicity stats for our current employees to compare to our terminations over the last 2 years. Employees could disclose their ethnicity digitally while doing new hire paperwork electronically, and then again on a physical form for the department that also asks their primary language. For current employees, I could run a report and I got about 75% of the data I needed. For terminated employees and anyone who didn't disclose, I had to pull their employee files to look at the physical form. Unfortunately, not many people filled out that section. I brought the data to my director, making those that I didn't have data for. She asked me to look at their employee ID photos and take my best guess. I declined and asked their direct supervisors. Story 52. Fudged some numbers in anticipation of an audit. It was for a city program, too. I had to account for money that was spent wrong or missing. Small amounts, but like 1,000 small amounts. And even produce numbers for tickets that were supposed to be accounted for, but were missing. So I had to deduce what these very specific ticket numbers would be if they were recorded as they were supposed to be. It was odd because the tickets would reappear. They were trackable. At the wrong time, it would prove that the data I was inventing was fraudulent. I was told things like, make sure this column equals 3,500 pound. I had no clue what I was doing, but I did it. I didn't realize it was probably really illegal until after I left the job. That was literally my only job. They called me an intern. Story 53. I worked at Best Buy for a while as asset protection. Some context before I go on. Around this time, there was a ring of thieves hitting Best Buy nightly around the state and stealing iPhones. They would pop the emergency exit, rush in with a garbage can on wheels, dump the phones, and bolt. As a means of slowing them down, we had to put the machine we used to lift/lower TVs and appliances in front of that door. One day, my manager got annoyed at me, not having anything to do, so told me to put that in place preemptively while customers were still in the store, essentially blocking an emergency exit. I refused and stood my ground. In the end, nothing came of it, and it kind of just got forgotten about. Seems tame compared to some of the other things I'm seeing, but still pretty illegal and dangerous. Story 54. First thing that came to mind was when I worked at a Tim Hortons like 10 years ago. Manager asked me to scrub down the dumpster to try to deter all the hornets and wasps that were attracted to it. I said sure and got a pail of sanitizer used for dishes and a scrub brush attached to a broom handle. Cleaned the outside of it and areas of the inside that I could reach. She comes out to inspect my work and I crap you not. She wanted me to climb into the dumpster to scrub the bottom of it. I was like, I am not getting stuck in a dumpster, especially with wasps everywhere. I then proceeded to dump the bucket of sanitizer into the dumpster and said that's as good as it's going to get, and walked back inside. Story 55. I'm so happy I have a niche skill and am in a higher percent of the quality I put out. I've been asked to do stupid things, but at one point, I work in a salon with animals. I've straight looked my boss in the eyes and told them, no, I'm not doing that. When it came to my safety and the animals, I used to get pushback until one day I snapped and said, so you know the blueprint to my styles? You'll hold my hands like that ghost movie and force each finger to move while we hold sharp objects. That's what this is. Never had an issue like that again, but ended up leaving due to other issues that crafty boss did. So glad I've left that salon for well over 2 years. Story 56. I was happy to get hired as the second IT guy for about 300 people. Worked my butt off for 2 years carrying the other guy with lots of extra hours. Finally saw Nova on Alcoholics and the games they play to hide it, and realized I'd been totally played by the other IT guy. Immediately met with my boss and said, dude, he and everybody else knew it, and asked me to just continue pulling extra weight and not make waves because it could become a big problem. Other guy totaled his car a week later, his third in 2 years. People were hurt, and he couldn't talk his way out of it. Story 57. I was a bagger at a grocery store when I was 18-19. We were in a state with a recycling law where we had to accept empty bottles and cans back, and part of my job was counting and sorting them in the back. The shopping carts got really dirty and sticky because they were used to carry them into the store a lot. One day, the manager told me to take a bunch of them to the car wash across the street. The street was a highway. I had to push a line of shopping carts across a busy highway with no crosswalk, wash them in the car wash, then push them back across. Almost 30 years later, I'm still not sure if he was pranking me. Story 58. One time while I was in the US Navy, I started having a tightness in my chest, so I went to medical and they diagnosed me with pneumonia in my right lung. My command still made me go on a month-long boat detachment the following day. They gave me antibiotics and I recovered fully within a couple weeks. But it was still sort of crazy to me that they sent me to the middle of the ocean for a month with limited medical care, knowing I had pneumonia. I wasn't even put on light duty or anything. I worked every day, 12 hours a day. I think the worst part, though, is that Navy Medical tried to release me before they even looked at the x-rays because they thought I was making it up to get out of going on the detachment. Story 59. Worked at a warehouse for a few years. Great job. The crew I was on basically was the last one there most nights. Like, it was just me and 3-4 other dudes, no management or supervisor or even security. Well, one night at like 1 a.m., I get a call from our SR manager. Dude is literally the second in command there, and basically asked me to bring some other guy and go pick him up at the bar and drive his car to his house. We go do that and ended up drinking with him for a while, and he even stubbornly made a move on the bartender to get her to give me her phone number. He ended up giving us like 8 hours of OT in the system the next day. Wild times working in that place. Story 60. Boss demanded I find $500 in pennies from local banks for a corporate competition. That in itself was near on impossible. We only had 2 banks in town and it was extremely short notice. Once I had the pennies, I was told that in the rental house to the rear of the business, I was to soak every single penny in a bath full of cleaning fluid until they sparkled. I did it because I was young and didn't want to lose my job, but nope, TF out of there. When the fumes overwhelmed me, I was using my own personal bath towels to dry them on and I nearly fainted. I was frog-marched from the business, belongings still inside while he and his wife insisted I was just lazy and told to never come back. Story 61. Told me I couldn't be late for a shift, despite my reason being I was trying to get diapers for my ex-mother-in-law who was on hospice, dying from stage 4 cancer during the pandemic. It wasn't even busy that day. My ex-Mill died that night and I didn't get to say bye. I literally said, "Be right back," and searched 3 different stores for the diapers she needed. That's when I called my work to let them know I might be running late. And then a month later, someone else was late because they forgot what time they started at. And that same manager excused it. A Karen, really. It's not as if I was a bad employee. I literally got awards and promotions. I should have called out Story 62, worked at concrete plants as a driver, delivered 3 yards to a place pouring a parking lot. I unloaded it all and was in the middle, washing out and filling the drum when my boss called. "Are you still there?" "Yeah, what's up?" "Those cheap ducks don't want to pay. They say they don't like the product. I'll give you a $5 raise and a new truck if you drive through that crap." "Seriously?" "Yep, go duck it up. It's still mine, and I don't want them cheap craps to have it." I drove around the parking lot, honked 5 times, and they scattered, peeled through the setting mud, and hauled ass back to the yard, parked the truck, and got the keys for my new one. Man, I miss that place sometimes. Story 63. He's American and I live in a country where you need to pass through several psychological tests to be able to own a gun. You also need to pass a shooting test and can own just a certain amount of guns. I believe 2 or so. My boss already had plenty that he got other people to bring to him. He wanted to pay for all my papers and for me to travel to the States and purchase hunting rifles and bring them into my country under my name, but to be used by clients that came for hunting. Obviously, no one could know that the guns were to be used by other people. If any accident happened with these guns, I would be charged for it. Oh way. Story 64. So, first day on the job for this construction company, for my summer job. Big ducking Trevor takes me out in the truck and we meet the boss man at a university. He looks up and asks, "Afraid of heights?" "Yeah, Ducker, just a little." Tells me the scaffolding needs to come down, asks if I've ever done it before, and tells me it's easy. It was easy. It was also super sketchy and dangerous. Here's me, day 1, up 3 or 4 stories, dismantling scaffolding. Scaffolding needs to be erected and dismantled by trained operatives, not a goofy, clumsy, who was too stupid to know any different. Doesn't help that my boss was my then-girlfriend's father, and I wanted to impress Story 65, mow his lawn. I wasn't a landscaper, I worked in a factory cutting metal. That wasn't in the job description. He drove all of us, a bunch of Mexicans, to his house to cut his grass. Also, wash his car. He made us wash his car and RV. Let me remind you, I worked in the ducking factory. I would cut metal pieces for cars or air conditioners all day. We were in the shop cutting, measuring, and bending metal, creating these pieces, and then the boss would come in with his chores and use us for it. I refused. That's not what I signed up for. I had a big attitude and got fired. Best thing that could have happened to me. Story 66. Not my current boss, but my old boss. Insisted I had to clean all the walls, which were covered in this plastic paneling that had a weird texture to it. First by hand, then by spraying cleaning spray and using a Swiffer to swipe down and down the walls because the hand scrubbing hadn't gotten it clean enough, only to be followed by a third cleaning with bleach water and a Mr. Clean Magic eraser. I found out after the 4th full day of cleaning the walls that it didn't matter. They'd be doing remodeling over the summer. I worked in a school kitchen, which would get dust everywhere, and I'd have to clean them again when school started anyway. Story 67. In high school, I worked at a restaurant. I got strep and bronchitis at the same time. I told my boss I couldn't come in, I was literally too sick to stand for more than a minute or two. I was too sick and weak to stand long enough to shower. I told my boss this, and he said, "I need to come in." I was like, "Dude, I'm too sick to even stand." Regardless of what my job was, I wouldn't go to work. I am especially not going to go make food for people while having 2 contagious illnesses. A few days later, he fired me over a text. What a terrible way to spend winter break of my senior year. Story 68. I once worked at a car repair shop that was failing so bad to the point of nearly going out of business. These are all of the following things my boss made my coworkers and I do to help stir up business. Park our own cars in the shop and open the hoods so it looked like we had customers. 2, he would ask us to leave anonymous, fake good reviews of the place online in bribe of going home early, taking a longer break, etc. 3, he would make us blow up balloons and tie them to stacks of new tires outside, not understanding that without helium, they would fall to the pavement immediately. I quit after 5 months. Story 69. Oh boy, my time to shine. Cooking the books, tax aviation, not allowing me to get something to drink during the scorching hot day, or go to the little girl's room, deducting hours worked for hourly employees without reason. And the best, told me to stuff my face with over-the-counter allergy medication when my eyes were swimming in tear floods. Already tried those days prior with no effect. Turns out allergy medication doesn't work on dry eyes. Who would have thunk it? And before anyone asks, no, this is not a doctor's office. They were a bar, and I was back office. It was over attending a doctor's appointment for my vision, hindering my ability to work. Story 70. My company was informed that insurance companies that pay for our service will not pay us to do our session notes during sessions like they did before. I learned that this was because the session notes that my company has us doing are far longer and more in depth than insurance companies require. So the solution? We were told to do bits and pieces of our session notes throughout session while out clients were taking breaks, or we were not actively engaged with the client. So basically, instead of spending 15 minutes at the end of session to do notes, we were supposed to squeeze it in during session. What's the difference? Basically, our whole company is committing insurance fraud. Story 71. I work for an outreach dep for a state GovT. We had an exhibit table that we were supposed to staff at a trade show several years ago during an epic blizzard. The governor was on the TV saying only first responders should be on the road. My executive director still expected me to go out to the show. I refused. The next day, I found out that there was a multiple car pileup on the limited access highway, and I would have been out on that road at that time. I still had to write up a 2-page report why I went against the assignment. Story 72. Well, mine is really tame compared to all of this. My boss had a couple of young'uns. I get along well with the kids, and I babysat for them occasionally. Little one had a rough time going to sleep around 2 or 3 and started demanding that Uncle Punk Thug read her a story every night. So for a good 3 or 4 months, she would hold the phone while I read her The Hobbit. Took about 15 minutes on average, and my boss insisted he pay me out of pocket. Story 73. Worked as an EAT temp at a telemarketer back in the late 90s. Company used an auto dialer that they had to pay a monthly fee to keep active. The auto dialer company had a dedicated modem line into the machine and could shut it off remotely. So near the end of each month, my boss at the telemarketer would send me and my coworker out to all the call centers to unplug the auto dialer modems because they know they'd be late paying the monthly fee. One week, the company missed payroll, and the employees at one of the call centers set fire to the bushes outside the building. The company went under about a month later. Story 74. Asked me if I know someone that can sell him good quality substances. After I told him it is very unprofessional of him to ask me illegal things, he says he was just testing me. 2 weeks later, he told me I'm not loyal and he needs to fire me. Unlucky for him, I had the conversation recorded and we settled out of court. Story 75. One time my manager at Walmart asked me to give 4 weeks notice on a day off I had scheduled 3 weeks in advance. It was the day of, still not approved or denied, and I was on my way to the airport for the first vacation I'd gone on in 10 years. I gave my 2 weeks notice the day I got back. Had I not been in high school, I wouldn't have given that courtesy at all. Asshats never gave me my discount card after a year and a half. Didn't update my account when I turned 18 and made me stay 15 minutes past my shift almost every day. Story 76. I worked part-time at a restaurant in my teens. My boss once asked me to go on an emergency drive to a store for more supplies. My problem? I didn't have a license and had only just started to learn how to drive. My boss's solution? It's okay, just don't get pulled over. She was stressed and not thinking straight, and quickly realized that it would be better to ask someone else. Story 77. I was an intern. Supervisor calls me up on a Saturday to ask if I could deliver a thumb drive by car to Cape Cod. They'd pay a flat rate and reimburse for gas. I told her I wasn't sure, since I'd literally just been in an accident. She paused and said, "So do you think you can do this for us?" I ended up driving like 4 hours round trip in the rain to deliver a piece of plastic. Made like a $30 courier tip though. Story 78. I've done a lot of kind of crazy crap. Collect and get rid of 800 yards of trash strewn throughout a property in 4 days with 4 people. Ended up taking 2 weeks with 8. Another would be help bury his boss. Story 79. I was an apprentice in my 3rd year. Me and my boss hated each other, but it's not that easy to fire an apprentice in Germany when you ducked up everything as an instructor. She told me to fold 10,000 of presents for our customers, which was clearly a punishment in her eyes. But since I had a good connection to the boys in the storage department, I was wandering around driving with the fork, drinking coffee and having fun, and telling my boss at the end of the day, I had done like 20 in a day. I did that for like 4 months. Story 80. Canadian geese are common in my area and are a protected species. My boss asked me to remove a nest they had recently laid eggs in because it was near an entrance and the mother was being aggressive with the people coming close. I refused because of their protected status, and I didn't want to even get close to the eggs, recommending that they call animal control instead to handle it. A different employee removed the nest and destroyed the eggs. The mother wasn't aggressive anymore because all she could do was lay in the spot her eggs were and cry for 3 days. Reddit, what incredibly out-of-touch thing have you seen a boss do? Story 1. I used to work at an investment bank where we all had these super comfortable 300 chairs. These mother duckers were shipped in from some chair boutique in Sweden and were designed using the latest research in chair ergonomics and posture. I spent a couple of weeks customizing mine by lovingly twisting and pulling the numerous levers peppered on the underside of the base until it felt like the chair was crafted for my bottom. It cocooned me like a warm, soft hand, and I looked forward to going to work just so I could sit in my chair, rest my forearms on the soft, cushioned armrest, and hook my feet around the polished chrome legs. I even named her. She was my Susan. Then, my world crashed around me, flames licking at my feet. I was ill with the flu one day and didn't go into work for 2 days. When I returned to the office, Susan was gone. I blinked furiously, hoping she would magically appear. I asked my colleague Rupert where she was, and he told me that he last saw her being wheeled away by the VP of the trading desk, my boss. I asked him if he'd seen my chair, and he told me that he'd borrowed it briefly for a work experience student but had returned it to my desk. Clearly, the mother ducker had done no such thing. He had pulled Susan away from the only life she knew and left her in some cold part of the office. Problem was, I worked on a trading floor with around 120 traders, the vast majority of whom had the exact same chairs. My Susan looked just like nearly every other chair on the floor. Finding her again would be impossible. I began the task of sitting on every chair, meticulously fondling and prodding the fabric, hoping to feel the soft cushioning of Susan's foam. But I was doomed from the beginning. My crippling doubt meant that I would always second-guess and question myself. Was this really Susan? The armrests don't quite feel right. I'm sure there wasn't a scuff on the chrome leg. My boss, the heartless git he is, stole the one true love of my life. I know you're out there, Susan, and I know you're probably scared and afraid, but I will find you. We will be reunited in this life or the next. Story 2. This is my moment to shine. I worked in an organic food warehouse for a very small company. My boss's boss leaves the company, and we get some executive type from a big company. The old boss was there 60, 70 hours a week working on paperwork and running the warehouse production. The new boss shows up and spends most of his time locked in his office on the internet, dosed up on pain pills. One of his first acts was to completely redo the production process. Taking a very efficient model, most employees work 40, 50 hours per week with little stress, and flipping it on its ass, tripling the amount of work to be done. To process a single standard order, you had to email back and forth 5 times. If the order had issues or was complicated, this could escalate to 10, 20 emails for a single order. I went from 30, 50 emails a day to 300, 500. Production was the most efficient department before he showed up and became the worst. We used to produce 20K, 30K LBs a day. After his intervention, we were lucky to get 10K. This wasn't helped by the fact that the production team was required to sit in on all meetings. So my boss spent 6, 7 hours a day at meetings, on top of his normal 40-hour week. Yes, he was there for 12 hours every day, 16, 20 hours each weekend. His boss was there around 30. Like OP, he moved the meeting schedule from 1:30 to 11:30, when most people were on lunch. He tried to make them lunch meetings, or where you don't get paid and have to bring your own lunch to the meeting room, but that got shot down. So everyone's lunch schedule got shuffled around. He'd routinely scream into his phone about someone's incompetence, and this was in a very small, thin-walled office. If you messed up, everyone could hear every word. After 6 months of work in the warehouse, he still did not know how to use the inventory system or the accounting system. He was the manager of production and the warehouse. He hired a consultant to teach us more about the inventory system. Some old dude showed up, He forgot to tell us because he only hired him to win a fight with another department. So I was taken from my extremely demanding job and got to sit in a room with this old guy for 6 hours. I literally taught him how to use the system, and he was taking notes on how we used it. His flight, hotel, plus wages were paid for by my company so that I could do his job while not doing mine. Immediately after the consultant left, he jumped up and went home. It was around 3 p.m. He made some of his employees babysit his children when he was on business trips for no pay. He hired his wife, then she was allowed to work from home, and then they got divorced. We all know this because we could hear their fights from his office. Not sure if she's still employed. I have way more stories, but I think that's enough for now. One more. He made the decision to fudge some paperwork and hide things that were salmonella or E. coli positive. One of our customers tested their product, found salmonella. The FDA came to our plant and spent a month there. And now when you Google the company, the second page is about the FDA investigation. I won't provide proof though because it was a small company and they'd immediately know who I am. Story 3. I was working as a temp in a small office and started to organize potlucks so we could have a nice lunch together once in a while. Management heard and thought that was a great idea, so they took it over. Suddenly, potlucks needed approval from management, despite it being solely organized by employees off the clock and taking place during our lunchtime. There was also going to be a winner, and we would vote for who made the best dish. I won most of the time and actually felt awkward about it. One time, the head of the company actually came in during the potluck and started giving us a schedule for the meal and how and when voting was going to occur. We're just trying to have lunch here. Calm down. All I wanted was to do something nice for and with my coworkers. I didn't plan for it to be a management tool or a competition. Story 4. I started my shift one day at 2:30 p.m. My coworker started his shift at 1:30 p.m. and was going to be late, so he asked us if we could switch. I say, of course, and arrived at work at 1:30. As I get to the main office, my boss steps out of his office with a grin on his face and say, "Well, you're in early today." I explained that our coworker was running late and asked if we could switch. Instantly, the color and happiness drains from my boss's face and he steps back into his office without saying a word. At 2:30, after my coworker arrives, he is asked to step into my boss's office. 15 minutes late, they both come out. My boss gathers his things and leaves without a word. My coworker turns to me and just grumbles, "What a ducking." As it turns out, my boss had expected to leave when I got into work, originally planned for 2:30. When I arrived early, he got all happy thinking he got to leave an hour early. Having learned that that was not the case, my boss decided to write up my coworker and threatened to fire him for not telling him that he switched shifts that day. That was a dumb day. For clarity, my boss worked with his employees, as in alongside them. He did pretty much the same work as us, but for higher pay, and with the title manager. I worked at a Chevron car wash. It was necessary to have 2 people on at all times because our Chevron sold propane, which the car wash employees filled. If we had cars and propane at the same time, one person would wash cars and the other propane. Therefore, if my boss had left at 1:30, I would have been stuck doing the job of 2 people. Story 5. I used to work for a landscaping service. I started out in store the summer after my freshman year of college. I ended up on a commercial install crew. Did really well. The next summer, I came back with the understanding of being on commercial again. They decided to make me delivery crew chief instead, which meant a slight bump in pay, and that I had to drive the truck. I hate driving trucks. Anyway, the whole thing was a clusterduck from the beginning. I was given 0 instruction on where to find items pulled for delivery for customers, and they were scattered all over the lot. I was given no instruction on how to drive a box truck, and I was 19, so the 3-point check and various other concepts like operating the hydraulic gate or dump switch were new to me. What screwed me most, though, was the fact that they had just hired a new delivery coordinator, and this guy was simply terrible at his job. Gave me deliveries out of order, gave me wrong addresses for deliveries, etc. He was nice enough, but just struck me as a complete git. So after a few truly miserable weeks of busting my ass to get things done in time, having to pick up items from wrong addresses and deliver them to new ones on top of items already scheduled for that day, I pull into the truck bay at the end of the day, and the assistant manager stops me and says the owner doesn't want me coming in the next day and is probably going to fire me. The owner did not speak with me about this at all, and the assistant manager assured me of some bullcrap like he'd try to talk him down and to give him a call the next morning. I called the assistant manager the next morning, who told me, yeah, I'd been fired. I said I was going to come in and speak with the owner. He said that wasn't a good idea, and that the owner was busy and I couldn't pop in unannounced. I told him that my whole situation had been largely unannounced, so yes, I felt that I could. Went in to see the owner. Guy went on and on about, it's a free enterprise society, and I can do what I want. I could tell from his 30 different directions of excuses that it was probably a matter of gas money being wasted from having to redeliver items, pick up items from wrong addresses, etc. But at the end of the day, he He said it was because I had been curt with a customer, and he had a zero-tolerance policy. I told the customer in question, who had just ordered a delivery and not an installation, yet insisted on the latter, that an install would void her warranty. That was it, though she was a mean old, and I could have said loads more. So basically, I was fired for the delivery coordinator's incompetence. Then I guess the owner, figured this out and fired him a week later, and immediately rang me to ask if I was available to start back. I'd already landed a lower-paying summer job and was completely content to stick with that instead. The owner apologized, and it was really weird, but I told him I had another job and wasn't interested. The other job was one of the best things to ever happen to me. Story 6. My old boss, in a construction company, thought that if I ate my lunch while driving the company truck from one site to another that I had to knock the half hour off my time card for lunch. I explained to him, just because I'm eating while working doesn't mean I'm not working, but for him, it's the other way around. He thinks the fact that I am eating means I should be working for free. My current newspaper editor is hysterical. She demands the highest possible ethical standards, but insists I only write news articles about businesses that buy ads, and I'm not allowed to give coverage to any business owner that doesn't buy ads. I think I may quit soon. Story 7. I have a good one. A few years ago, I was working at the corporate office for a rather large company that was about to do a big layoff due to financial problems that had been going on for the last few years. I was sitting in a conference room with about 30-50 other employees who were all getting laid off, waiting for the VP to arrive and give the official announcement and pass out the paperwork, etc. Everyone else was there, the HR people and unemployment rep, etc., but we all had to wait 20 minutes for this guy to show up before we could officially proceed. It was beyond tense and awkward. So the guy shows up and apologizes to the other suits up front about how his plane was a little late, arriving from his company-paid vacation in the Florida Keys, and proceeded to talk and joke with them about how much fun he had on his trip for about 10 minutes. Then it was like he suddenly remembered what he was there for and was all, "Okay, so let's get this thing over with," and turns back to the rest of us to start his spiel about how this whole situation was so unfortunate, and though the company valued all its employees equally, this was unavoidable and how they were so sorry, blah, blah, blah. I like to think he was facing a whole room full of these, but maybe it was just me. I'm still pretty pissed about that experience. Joke's on them, though. They just recently announced that they are liquidating the company after several rounds of trying to save it through bankruptcy proceedings and buyouts. Suckers. Story 8. Worked at a preschool. The site supervisor walked through the room I was supervising children in and began to berate me about a tiny dirt pile in the corner of the room that needed sweeping in front of the children while I was helping an upset child with a wound on their leg. First rule of being a teacher: children come first. I put her in her place, though. She brought up the incident again in front of the other teachers during our meeting time in an effort to assert her authority. I interrupted her, explained the situation from my POV, and our behavioral consultant backed me up and lectured her about how to act as an adult in a classroom in front of all the teachers. It was glorious. The consultant reported the incident to administration, and they decided that our site supervisor wasn't allowed to sit in our teacher meetings because it was counterproductive, and she wasn't allowed to make any comments or decisions about the day-to-day operation of the school, because that's the master teacher's job. That site supervisor was a real idiot. She didn't know anything about running a school. She just came from a privileged background and treated the preschool like it was her own little private gigantic dollhouse for her to decorate. She would blow our entire budget on furniture that oftentimes the children wouldn't even be allowed to use. It was just so the school would prettier. She constantly interrupted children while they were working on something so that she could pretend to be Mary Poppins or some crap and try connecting with them. Problem was, all the children hated her because she was a mega Karen 95% of the time. And children know what's up, they aren't dumb. The most annoying thing she did was always bring up the fact that she has a master's degree. She would always be super vague about it, though, and eventually I learned that her master's degree was in theology and she got it from a ducking online school. I hated that Karen with a passion. Story 9. I worked as a programmer and developer web applications. We had a development and a production server. My manager would look at my apps using 2 different computers and 2 different monitors. I used CSS files to set the color and style of various HTML elements of a web app I would design. Anyway, he called me into his office, asked me why the color on the production server was different from the development server. I told him they both used the same CS style sheet and the same color definition. He claimed they didn't and wanted me to change the development version to the same color as the production one. After a while, he finally noticed his second monitor tint was out of sync and adjusted it to a test pattern, and then both colors matched up. But we wasted hours going over the CS files and source code to prove that the colors were the same. This would happen every once in a while, and he would forget having that discussion with me. Also, when I had an app written, he would want me to make changes to it, not knowing that those features and settings and changes were already in the program. He'd insist they were not there, and that I needed to add them in or change them. Eventually, he found out they had what he was looking for. This would continue week after week as well. He also refused to let me program in objects or use collections or complex data structures because he didn't understand how they worked. He wanted me to make the web apps work with Macintosh system, but also wanted me to stick with client-side VBScript and ActiveX controls. When I told them they didn't work with anything but Windows systems using Internet Explorer, he insisted that they do work as they are international standards that Microsoft made to work cross-platform, and that I was not allowed to use Java or JavaScript. After a while and seeing the web apps didn't work on a Macintosh, he allowed me to use JavaScript, but wanted me to keep ActiveX and not use Java objects. After 4.5 years of this, I was fired after being stressed out and developing schizoaffective disorder and some physical illnesses. I was told, and I quote, "Programmers are a dime a dozen. We get 500 resumes a week for your position. We can hire a programmer to replace you for a fraction of your salary that won't get sick at work." I lost my job in November 2001. I went on short-term disability in June 2001 from getting sick, and after I returned in November 2001, 2 weeks later I was fired after having a panic attack at work and not being able to snap out of it as my manager wanted. Story 10. I worked for a family-owned company. The family was rich, like millionaire rich, mom, dad, and grown son. There were only about 5 of us that worked there for minimum wage. Grown son boss, who has a Stephen Harper calendar and had previously told me that he didn't believe in student loans because that is his tax dollars helping others, has been asking me to stay late to close up. I marked the extra 15 minutes or half hour on my timesheet. One day I have to go to his desk to answer his phone. I regularly did his job in addition to my own for the last half of the day because neither one was hard. And I notice a small calendar with my name written beside the month, and in each small square things like 3M or 4M. There was one day marked 15M that I specifically remembered being a day where my car broke down over my lunch break and I had called to say I'd be late. I went and got my timesheet and my pay stub to do some math and saw that not only was he meticulously clocking minutes, I had been late returning from lunch, all under 5, but the a-hole had also not been paying me for the time I stayed late, all over 15, for a summer job, where the government paid a large portion of my wage. This man was a millionaire. I made minimum wage, although it was my second summer there. And I liked the job otherwise for its setting and how it let me save money by staying at home. I applied for and I got a job offer in my university city and quit shortly after this to go back for the second half of the summer. Ducking. Story 11. Found out that my infant daughter was rushed to the hospital. In tears, went to my boss to tell him that I had to leave. That wasn't a problem, however. The boss decides it was necessary to lecture me on how unprofessional it was for me to be showing so much emotion in the office before he would let me head out. Story 12. Ours was a fast-growing engineering company. I joined in the mid-90s. I was one of the first 3 engineers technicians to have internet access at our company. Dial-up. I used an analog line that bypassed our company digital phone switch. We had a bare-bones computer network, and I started researching company data sheets for the products I was working on, and then dumping those data sheets onto our network in a shared folder. This didn't go over well with management, who said that engineers shouldn't be on the internet, ever. The engineers saw the easy access to data sheets and revolted, resulting in giving everyone in engineering access to the internet. The company still didn't think the internet was in any way useful, and refused engineering advice to purchase their own domain name. So one of our engineers purchased the domain name. He kept it for 3 years until the company asked him for it. They asked him nicely, so instead of gouging them for a couple of $1 million, he sold it to them for the price of a new car. Finally, the company hired an IT guy to manage the network and the internet. In engineering, it was common for an engineer to have his or her PC sort of gutted so that we could use the older versions of in-circuit emulator while interfaced to a product motherboard. The AT manager implemented a draconian internet policy that blocked the Yahoo search engine, which was popular at the time. And he told the engineers that anyone who got around the firewall or anyone who didn't use a cookie cutter, underpowered computer would be subject to being fired. This was in the middle of the dot-com boom. Every single engineer was getting multiple headhunter calls from people begging for employees. They laughed so hard at the AT guy that I thought he would cry. I told him that firing an engineer meant that engineer would probably get a pay raise at a new company. It was war between the IT manager and engineers for the next couple of years. Several engineers would refuse to even notice when the IT manager tried to call or talk or email them. The war only ended when a savvier higher-up created an IT department with its own vice president and set the IT manager as one of several company IT service reps. Story 13. I used to work for Costco. I was fired for failing a urine analysis positive for substances. I was sold substances all from different members of the management and supervisor teams over the course of 10 years. These weren't off-site, off-the-clock transactions either. Most took place at work. Not that it makes a huge difference. One manager in particular used to feed me pain pills while I was working the register all the time. The same manager had to be hauled out of the warehouse on a stretcher because she was overdosing on their prescription pain meds and foaming at the mouth, having a seizure. Maybe it was a legit seizure, but this particular individual was so zoinked out on pills 100% of the time, their eyes could barely open, and you couldn't understand anything they said due to the slurred speech. This is not a complaint about the termination of my employment. I'm much happier now that I'm not there. Just stating some facts. Costco is the biggest do as I say, not as I do place around. A good old boys club where the only limit to your advancement is the amount of ass you can kiss. Another example of bullcrap behavior. A manager got caught having sex with a subordinate in the manager's vehicle in the parking lot of their warehouse. Gross misconduct of company policy. She should have been terminated. Instead, she was transferred to another warehouse and remained a manager, and the story was swept under the rug, except for those who know the individuals personally and had no problem confirming the facts for everyone to know. I wrote an email documenting everything I could remember after I was fired. I chose not to send it to corporate in the event that I wanted to try and get my job back after 12 months. I don't think I'd ever want to work there again, no matter how good the pay for the work and the benefits are. Ducking great. Story 14. I was working at an ice cream place and someone got explosive diarrhea. There was crap on the wall behind the toilet, on top of seat, and overflowing down the side of the toilet onto the floor around it because the toilet was really backed up. He expected me to clean it fine, without gloves or a bodily fluids kit, just with our thin paper towels, soap, and water. I asked him why he wouldn't do it if it wasn't so awful, which he claimed. And he said, well, it's ducking disgusting and unsanitary to clean it that way. I replied, exactly, and quit. Story 15. I had a new boss. At this time, she'd been there like 2 weeks. At my job that I had been at for 2 years, we were having a huge company visit. So I got in extra hours helping prep for this visit. Everyone was taking extra hours to prep for this visit because in her first 2 weeks as manager, she'd been there 3 times. So she calls me the night before the visit to ask how to run a basic report, one that I'd told her how to run at least 3 times. This time I told her to get out a pen as it pretty much walks you through how to do it on the screen. She laughed. I didn't. She asked me what time I'll be going to bed because she might want me there at 8 a.m. instead of 10 a.m. It was about 6 p.m., so I told her I would indeed be up for a while longer if she needed to call me. So we close at 9. 9:30 rolls around, no phone call. I'm at my boyfriend's house, which is an hour away from work, and we go to bed. 10:45, I get a phone call from her, asking me to come in at 7. I agreed. She told me she would be there at 8. I was like, okay, so I get there at 7 and start on these small tasks she had made a list of to do. Well, she calls at 8 saying she'd be late, and she'd been on the road for like 2 hours. I asked her where she was coming from. She was on the same highway as me, I didn't tell her this, and had left at the same time. How the hell are you late? If you left at 6 a.m., went down the same highway as me, and I got here at 6:45? She starts talking about traffic and accidents. She showed up 30, then made me make up a sales plan. Last time I checked, that's the manager's job, not a part-time assistant manager's job. But okay, like 2 weeks later, she fell and has now been on leave for 5 months. Me and another manager checked her time card. She'd worked a total of 5 days in the store in a month. Funny. Story 16. I worked at a company for 5.5 years. I was the manager of a small section, 3 to 5 other people at any given time, for about 5 of those years. It was a smaller company that employed about 50 people at any given time. Lots of turnover. That company would bring in about 1 mil in revenue and have about 1.2 in salary costs. The average income was about $10 or $12K. Managers a few thousand more, and the owner's family even more, totaling right about $900,000. The boss, owner, got the remainder. So he's sitting around with about $300,000 a year. Revenue was generated for nonprofit charities, so it kept taxes at a minimum. Lots of write-offs as well. The last year I worked there, I asked for a quarter raise. No. A 1-week paid vacation. One other non-family member employee got it because she worked with the owner's mom. No. Christmas rolls around and I find out I'm getting a bonus. Finally something. What is it? $75. 75 ducking dollars. My 5th Christmas at the place and I got less than a day's pay. Something is better than nothing, sure. Holiday bonuses aren't anything guaranteed. A few months later, I put in my 2 weeks and moved across country. Owner told me, see you in a month, in a tone only a can generate. I went back to my hometown to visit 8 months later and stopped by the old office. Plenty of coworkers were good friends, and let my boss know I was making a few times as much as I did while working for him with full health coverage, 2 weeks vacation, a week's sick time, and plenty of other benefits, plus a yearly bonus that equals about 10% of my yearly income. Of course, I did that after he talked about profits, which were down 20%. Felt good, man. Keep in mind, this guy was A in general. Only good thing about the job was the flexibility. The guy had no idea what employee appreciation meant and barely any business sense. He'd come in every 3 or 4 months and try to fix things he didn't understand. He was so out of touch. I feel bad my brother and sister-in-law still work there. Story 17. It's so sad when great workplaces get ruined by new management. I had a job where that happened once. I worked at Staples as a computer repair guy, and the job was good at the time and the people were awesome. But then, of course, a new boss comes in and proceeds to ruin everything. I've heard about how we're getting a new store boss for a few weeks, and one day I come in on my day off in my civilian clothes and, oh, it's the new boss's first day. I'm going to go over and introduce myself. I extend my hand for a handshake and tell him, I'm one of the computer guy here. My name is Retrospect. This ducker doesn't even tell me his name. He immediately starts asking me about sales. This is my first time meeting you, and before introducing yourself, you're asking me how many viruses repairs we've had last week and if I know about what our store average is, and it's all downhill from there. Long story short, everything was running beautifully before, and it was just me and one other guy running the computer department. He turns everything on its head, makes us learn new procedures, which he keeps changing constantly. First, it has to be one way, and after we learn it a month later, he wants it done differently. The department goes to crap. My great and very knowledgeable coworker ends up leaving. Customers are unhappy, orders are getting screwed up, and everything is declining. 2 new guys come in and duck the place up worse. And in the meantime, I am constantly getting crap from the boss, despite the fact that I was keeping the whole place afloat. I get written up for petty crap over and over, for having a bottle of water at the register once, for talking to people in other departs another time. Eventually, I ducking left, and I can only imagine how much worse it got after that. Out-of-touch management sucks, especially when they think they're doing so much good. Story 18. AOL bought Netscape a while back. AOL is a Virginia company that doesn't understand tech culture that well, which is one reason why it sank. So, in the early 2000s, this executive comes in from the East Coast to Mountain View, and because everyone east goes to work early and there is a 3-hour time difference, comes in at 7:30 a.m. And he's shocked no one is in the office. So he demands that people show up at 7:30 a.m. Now, this is a culture of people who get up late, code late, hate meetings, and hate being forced to go anywhere. Naturally, a lot of people quit. A good chunk were already rich, and the others moved to other Mountain View companies. You know, like a small startup named Google and the like. Story 19. I once had a former boss who told me, you should be more of a team player and stop relying on others for help. So, working for a team means not bothering other team members or relying on them for support? No, it's like a team of horses. They don't rely on each other to pull the load. Yes, they do. That's why you have more than one. It's working together in the same direction that increases their net gain. Yes, but horses don't talk to one another, do they? So you're saying I should not talk to my fellow coworkers? That's what I mean. How will I learn anything? The same way they did, by asking. Asking whom? This is what I mean. You're not a team player. You're always asking difficult questions. I quit that job. I've had more than one boss consider training to be the internet. That's fine, as long as I have some dedicated alone time to study and read. Do that on your own time. You have work to do. I worked with one manager, not mine, thank goodness. Say, essentially, he doesn't like training people because then they get cocky and leave or demand more pay, and when he won't give it, they leave. I asked him, so you'd rather have an untrained person stay rather than risk training a person so they leave? He said, yes, with a smile, and tapped his head like he was pointing to his brain. So then why do so many people quit under you? His answer was, because the world is full of gits. What a coincidence. Story 20. When the body was first made, all the parts wanted to be the boss. The brain said, since I control everything and do all the thinking, I should be the boss. The feet said, since I carry man where he wants to go and get him in position to do what the brain wants, then I should be the boss. The hands said, since I must do all the work and earn all the money to keep the rest of you going, I should be the boss. And so it went with the eyes, the heart, the lungs, and all the other parts of the body, each giving the reason why they should be the boss. Finally, the a-hole spoke up and said it was going to be the boss. All the other parts laughed and laughed at the idea of the a-hole being the boss. The a-hole got so angry that he blocked himself off and refused to function. Soon, the brain was feverish and could barely think. The feet felt like lead weights and was almost too weak to drag the body anywhere. The eyes grew bleary, and the hands hung useless at the sides. all pleaded with the brain to let the a-hole be declared the boss. And so it happened. All the other parts did all the work, and the a-hole just bossed and passed out a lot of crap. The moral: you don't have to be a brain to be a boss, just an old a-hole. Alternate moral: no matter how well things are going, it can all be shut down by a single a-hole. Story 21. My old boss would get incredibly angry when customers would complain about prices. Almost every time this happened, he would raise the price of that item and justified it by saying, "The less volume I sell, the more I have to get for each item to break even. Customers shouldn't be so stingy." Story 22. Worked in a store. My boss was a woman that inherited the company from her husband. She didn't know anything related to our field of work. She came in at 09 o'clock to open up the store, sat in her office until 11 o'clock, and then she had her lunch. A cup of coffee and some bread with cheese. 11:30 was the time she left. We stayed to 1800. Same schedule every day, always. She didn't do crap, she wrote signs, and she didn't do any of the money stuff. She had hired some person that came and did the books, etc., etc. One day I was called into her office because her computer didn't work. I came in, didn't say anything, looked at the computer. The LED on the computer case was on, but the LED on the monitor was not on. I pushed the on-off and it turned on. Didn't say anything and she stayed quiet. I just left. She was weird around me. The next week, another time, we were working in 37°C heat, 90 in the summertime. No AC because that was expensive. One of our machines, film scanner, gave up due to the heat and production halted. Then she installed AC, but only in the back room where the machine was located. The store was still around the 37°C. 2 days later, she wanted to buy tickets for a Bruce Springsteen concert. She walked into a local store, and after 10-15 minutes, she called our store and asked one of my colleagues to bring her a bottle of water because it was so hard and hot. When the colleague came back, she told us that the store was a nice 20°C and felt nice and cold, ducking AC all over the other store. Karen boss couldn't even handle 15 minutes of standing up in 20°C, and we were working hard for hours in 37°C. Story 23. I work in university tech support. Recently had a department manager bring his laptop in because it wouldn't boot. Hard drive was dead, but he really needed the files on it. I was able to retrieve some of the files, replace the drive, and get him back up and running by the next morning. He says he will come by my desk the next morning to pick it up. Never shows. Later that day, I see him in passing. He asks if he can just go grab it right now from my desk. I say no, I have to have him there to set up his account, email, restore the files, etc. He says he will come by later that afternoon when I'm back at my desk. He doesn't. I leave for the day, I'm in my car driving out of the parking lot, and I get a call, "Hey, I'm at your desk." I say, "Okay, I'll be there in just a few minutes, 5-10 max." He says, "Never mind. I'll come by first thing at 9 a.m. tomorrow." I say okay, and I make a point of arriving promptly at 9 a.m. the next day. He shows up at 9:45. I start to set up the computer, and the last step to restore his files will take about 20 minutes. He can wait, or he can take it as is with none of the files, and I can silently push them out over the network later. He says he will come back in 20 minutes after he goes and does something. 30 minutes pass, and I walk out of my office into the hall, and he's just standing there against the wall texting or browsing the net on his phone. "Dude, do you want your computer? Do you care that I recovered your files from a dead drive? Anything? No? Alright, GTFO story 24. Best one I had was over Labor Day, if I recall correctly. Basically, I was working as a contract worker. Crap pay, no benefits, with a whole bunch of other people for a firm. Anyway, several of us asked on Friday if there was work on Monday, and no one seemed to know. So the questions floated up to the HR dept as to whether we should show up for the holiday. Was there holiday pay? If we did, etc., etc. Normal questions that probably should have been addressed before Friday. Anyway, at about 2:30, a mass email goes out to everyone saying that there was no work on Monday, and that it was a paid holiday for all employees, even for the contract workers. Everyone was in great spirits, and most everyone left the office by 3. Flash forward to 5:45. I'm just packing up, and another mass email goes out. It says that the prior email was wrong, that it wasn't a holiday, there was no paid day off, and we were expected to show up. I looked up from the crap-hole cubicle I was in and saw all of 5 people left in the office. The other 60 or so had already left for the holiday. I left and pretended I didn't see the email. The place was almost exactly like Office Space. It was a running joke how closely it followed the movie. They even had a guy who was fired, who never left and kept getting paid. No kidding. Ended up quitting that horrible job about a week later to go work somewhere eminently better. Last I heard, the firm was having financial problems because several large clients had dumped them. Something about mismanagement in story 25. I had a boss, he's dead now. Claimed to be an ex-SEAL, though that part I believe, though he was a bit short. but he would just get sick of you and fire you for stealing. I also didn't ever get my W-2 from him, and the following year I tried to get it and he wouldn't let me speak with his accountant. I'm not sure if that's kosher or not, but it seemed weird. The guy doesn't know me. I can't make him give up any info on you. I just want to get my refund from last year, jackhole. He told us in a meeting, essentially, I won't ever tell the customer to tell you to just give him the food. And of course, not a month later, he told a customer that, leading to him castigating me, and of course, the customer was furious. Nothing beats working for the megalomaniac in Houston, though. I got fired once for discussing the Fulsa. Just let that sink in. Later, I was not fired, but treated like crap for not being able to find a binder that was basically mythical. 1. The creation was instructed shortly beforehand, through me, to an assistant in a different office. 2. She quit soon thereafter and was told to not come in the following day upon giving her notice. 3. It likely never existed since she quit, but it was still demanded in a conference call, no less, that I produce said binder. I just encrypted my whole docs folder with TrueCrypt with a 63-character random ASCII password and walked before I could be fired. It was a kind of insurance policy against malfeasance. I'm amazed that guy's not in prison yet. Story 26. My company was run by crapheads, and this was a prime example. Company was failing, and the board fired the exec team, founders, and hired a new crew to come in and clean up. New CEO leaves within 2 months, so the COO gets bumped up. Now, he and those brought in with him are from an internet services company that had layoffs, and we are a gaming company. He brings in more execs with zero experience in this field, at 6-figure salaries, all people from his old company, while firing hundreds and shutting down offices worldwide. So, not a good time. We have a holiday party at a bar shortly into his and his cronies' tenure. This ducking guy stops the music and declares that it's time to reward some of the people for their hard work. Fair enough. Some of these people have watched good friends get laid of, and many had been there for 5, 7, 12 years. Each award he announces is to one of his cronies, and it's basically some dumb certificate of excellence. Nice slap in the face to everyone there. Story 27. I used to work managing a car wash. One morning, I woke up before work and noticed a reddish dirt covering everything. I was at my house still. There had been a dust storm in Arizona or something, and dust had mixed with rain, in my state effectively covering everything. I immediately haul-ass to the wash while calling every available employee to see if they were willing to come in, and most were. One of them didn't get my message until later and came in straight from where he was to load cars into the wash on his day off. Over the next few hours, he prepped and loaded about 90 cars an hour with no damage, no injuries, no problems. Until the owner came in. The employee was sagging his jeans, though otherwise in uniform. My boss said, "Hey, he should pull up his pants." Then he left. He came back 3 to 4 hours later and asked if I wrote him, the employee, up. I of course didn't because he performed flawlessly on his day off. My boss then got out too. Write up forms and handed them to me. One's for you and one's for employee. Write yourself up for failure to enforce company policies. Write employee up for not conforming to the dress code. When I objected, he threatened to fire the employee and suspend me. So I wrote myself up, seriously. And the awesome dude who saved the day, we laughed about it, but it was still complete. BS. Has anyone else written themselves up? TD 800 plus cars washed after diarrhea rain. Boss made me write myself and hood rat employee up. Story 28. My food services was a neurotic alarmist, apocalypse speculating germaphobe guy who possibly had undiagnosed ADHD but refused to see a doctor because he was terrified of being on substances and experiencing side effects. He was also in his mid-30s, but only moved out of his mother's house this year and had very strained relationships with the women in his life. He was an okay guy overall, but some of his tendencies drove me nuts. It wasn't uncommon for him to sit in his office all day, alternating doing actual work with watching stupid YouTube videos, reading survivalist literature, top 30 items to keep in a stockpile, or repeatedly checking websites that talked about signs that the world was ending soon. This guy actually moved on top of a mountain so he could be safe when the floods start, and took empty buckets from our kitchen so he could seal food in them. It got very frustrating sometimes, because not only did he always want to talk about these obsessions, he would end up doing very little work during the day. And if I was waiting for him to get something done for me to do a particular job, say print out a sheet of food prices so I could cross-check it with our menu, it might not get done until the end of the day, or even the next day, affecting my job performance. I felt bad for the guy, because he really did have some issues, but a lot of the time I just wanted to tell him to get a hold of himself. The stories I have about him are endless. Story 29. So, I have a manager who I see every day. He knows what's up and who I am. However, he's not my real manager. My official, real Matrix manager is technically my boss. No one knows his face unless he wants to give you bad news. So, this guy calls me in to hand me a 60-day layoff notice called a warn letter. I have 60 days left and then I'm out the door unless a different job is handed down the mountain. This matrix manager expressed mild interest in helping me find another position inside the company, but I've seen writing on the wall for a while now, and I know for darn sure that this dude cares for me about as much as he's cared to let his face known, e.g., not at all. As I'd been on second shift, I'd come in early at midday, especially for this little get-together. As he's trying to get to know me, the only times I've seen him is when he's delivering bad news, he straight-face asks me, "Have you done shift work?" Me, "Yes, I've done shift work." Him, "Oh, you have?" Me, "For my whole career, I've worked all 3 shifts." Him, "You've worked second shift?" Me, "I'm on second shift right now. Today, I started second shift 3 weeks ago." Him, "Oh, you are? How about grave shift?" Me, "I've done that too, several times." Him, "Oh, okay, that's good." Mission of Clueless in story 30. There is one particular partner at my firm that is pretty out of touch. Most of us just avoid addressing scheduling issues and such with her, but one of my coworkers has either no sense or enormous balls. First story. A bunch of assistants got staffed on this really horrific job that was going to require a lot of overtime by this partner. We're all students, so my coworker goes to talk to the partner. She says that when she mentioned the project, the partner cheerfully told her that we would all be working at least 12 hours for a few days. Coworker points out to partner that we all have schoolwork to deal with, the workload is pretty heavy, and suggested that we bring in extra people to help with the project to decrease the overtime. Apparently, the partner gave her a very serious look and told her that you don't do schoolwork during work hours. We don't get paid overtime. Another time, same partner lands this big contract and it turns out to be an absolute nightmare for the staff. Everything that can go wrong does, and they all end up stranded out of town in butt-duck nowhere for several weeks longer than originally scheduled. At our annual meeting, aka brainwashing session, that contract was talked up as one of our big successes that year. The firm will not sponsor a wrap party for the team of people that got screwed over on the project. I have tons more stories. Basically, our bosses just think they own us. Story 31. Damn, this is normal stuff at my work. 1. Schedule 7 o'clock meeting about pending reorganization. 30 minutes later, reschedule for 6:30. Cancel morning of. 2. Schedule client call for 5:30 a.m. Don't let team know until night before. Client cancels 30 minutes prior because one person can't attend. I'm sure I could think of others. One of my favorite pastimes is complaining about work. Story 32. In a company of 40 people, I was in charge of about 25. I had people complaining for months, I was new to that position, that they had gone 2 years, some longer without any raises. They were working for $8.50 an hour in cold 5 and 10 degree warehouses and just wanted a unlifty raise, like they were promised. So my boss, number 2 guy in the company, says that the guys can get their raise. Good news, everyone is happy. 1 week later, we have a meeting, all employees. Our good health insurance was being killed, and instead, we were going with a new company. Our new insurance was the lowest HMO option they had, and it cost more. One guy said, "How much more does it cost?" The president of the company, this whole time, had been writing in his appointment book. He snaps his head up and says, 48 cents an hour, and then goes back to writing in his book. He was using a sales trick, he thought. You never tell someone the GT package for their car is $2,000. You say it is only $32 a month. He felt by changing the statement to the employees to the lowest dollar amount, it would soften the blow. Of course, being almost exactly what their raise was and phrasing it exactly how people were told that they had received a raise, it completely backfired. Story 33. I work at a small company of less than 10 people. We were all told by the CEO that we wouldn't receive any raises that year because money was tight. A couple days later, we were all at a meeting with another company for contract negotiations. Numbers were thrown around for price negotiation, and our CEO says, $10,000? That's nothing. Don't worry about it. That being the price we would pay them. Story 34. My old office job. All the sales guys were in the boardroom doing a group video conference with National HQ. They came out happy, and some of the friendly ones stopped by my office to chat about what upgrades they could buy with their nice, hefty Christmas bonuses. It was something like 15% of annual salary. While they're taking to me, an email comes in from our division president to every non-sales employee in the province, about 300 people max, explaining how it had been a tight year, everything was down, and as such they wouldn't be able to do our annual crafty Christmas bonus of a $50 gift card. I did instant brain math and figured out the bonuses of the guys standing in my office would pay for the entire province's gift cards. By grand coincidence, the prez stopped by right then for a computer problem. The sales guys who had just heard me cussing scattered. My door closed, and we had a good chat. Shortly after, we got $20 cards with orders to not tell the other divisions. Pretty sure management bought then out of pocket. So thus is actually a story of both good and bad. Story 35. I had a boss that was completely oblivious to social cues. One day, a female coworker gets down on her knees to get something from the bottom shelf. My boss sees this and decides to make a joke and says, "You don't have to get on your knees to keep this job." My coworkers and I just stare at each other thinking, did he really just say that? A couple seconds later, he realized what he said and says, "To pray. You don't have to get on your knees to pray to keep this job." And before anyone asks, no, she didn't file any harassment complaint. She was just as surprised as everyone, and she knew how awkward this guy could be, and it was obvious he was trying to make a joke. Story 36. In the kitchen at McDonald's, there's usually 2 or 3 people working on the line making sandwiches. One who looks at the orders and toasts the buns, one who puts all the condiments and cheese on the sandwiches, and one who puts the meat on the sandwich and sends them to the cashiers. For the most part, everyone followed this procedure, but often people would work together to do something because it's more efficient. One manager disagreed with this and drew a line that I absolutely couldn't cross when I was working beside him. He then left the kitchen to take a call on his cell phone. So naturally, I just let all the food pile up on the other side of the line he drew, so he came back to 15 plus sandwiches to make while I stood there. Story 37. Working at a country club for a year. One of the meetings, our manager spent some time telling us that the best kind of workers are the ones never have to be told what to do. A few days later, we were working a wedding reception. During the ceremonial speech, we decided that we had some time to start polishing the silverware. After about 20 minutes, the manager barges in and scolds us for doing something we weren't told to do. I put my 2-week notice in a few days later.